Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody out there. A warm welcome to our annual conference of the Center for Humanitarian Action. My name is Ralf Südhoff, I'm the director of CHA, and I'm really pleased to welcome you to our event in Berlin. When we planned this event for the very first time, actually it has been this era when we all hardly knew how to spell COVID, and an era when we talked about Berlin as one of the coolest cities to visit in Europe, some people say. Today, unfortunately, Berlin is rather one of the hottest hotspots in Germany and in Europe. And so this event turned from a presence one to a hybrid one, and the very last days to a purely online one. While we must admit that we've been a bit disappointed about that in the very beginning, I may say that by now we have been so excited about you registering for that. We have more than 500 participants over the course of the next 2 days, while surely many of them still sleeping in America or other time zones on laid-back Berlin. So 500 participants are so well beyond our expectations because we are actually the new kid on the block, a really new humanitarian think tank, only founded in 2019. And as many of you will deal with us for the very first time, I'm happy to give you in a nutshell an introduction of what the CHA is doing, as we like to call it, while it would be great also to learn a bit about you and about the audience out there and about your company over the next 2 days. So if you don't mind, it would be great if we could share 2 quick questions in a survey. And if you are on Zoom, please join us and vote in the survey. That would be of great help. And of course, you can also follow us on YouTube and on Twitter with a live tweet and keep posting and chatting as much as you can and like over the next 2 days using maybe the hashtag #Nexus. That would be much appreciated. But going back to the survey, it would be great if you could give us an indication where you are dialing in from, where you are based right now. Is it Germany or other European countries, rather in America or Asia, Africa? That would be great if you could give us a hint. In the meantime, I may use the time just to share a quick reminder on the housekeeping. With such a big crowd, of course, bear with us. We have to mute everybody on video and audio, but it would be extremely appreciated if you participate, as indicated, as much as you can. So with this community engaging in our conference, we would be thrilled to discuss with you the topic of the Triple Nexus over the course of next 2 days. And in the follow-up, I'd like to give you a quick intro. Why do we focus on this topic, who we are, what we plan for the next 2 days, and on a survey we've done on your views, how you view the Triple Nexus, which will be shared in a few minutes by my colleague Sonja. So maybe if we can have a quick look again on the survey results. I think the audience has been pretty diverse, surely coming from a German focus. But let me share with you also another question on which might give you a taste on what this center is actually about. This time would be great if you could simply share an estimate with us. Of course, all this is not only about money, but an interesting question could be, even if you ask expert for a guess, it has an interesting outcome. Could you share just a quick estimate with us? And we see there are a lot of German experts actually in the audience, so let's see what comes out of it. So let's see, what's your estimate if we talk about public humanitarian funding? How has that evolved over the past 10 years? Please share a guess with us. Do you think it has increased? And it has increased, most of you will surely know that. Do you think it has increased by rather 50% or 100% or 900% or 2,000? So if you give us a guess on that one, it might give you a taste why 2019, and that's a tip. CHA has been founded by Doctors Without Borders, by Caritas International and German Dialgoue Katastrophenhilfe, and is supported today by ACF, Islamic Relief, and Help Germany. Another anecdotal hint might be when I returned from my last assignment with the UN World Food Programme for the Middle East, I could sense how much the scene had changed in Berlin, with many INGOs joining, with IRC moving its office from London to Berlin, with NRC joining the community, all the big players, INGOs expanding offices, as well as the humanitarian UN actors with WFP and HCR. So if we look at the survey, which is still moving and dynamic, it gives you also a sense and the flavor of why Berlin has turned into such a hub for humanitarian actions. And if we may be concluded right now, you can see, well, most guess, well, it has probably increased by 500%, maybe by 100%. In fact, it has been almost 2,000%. German humanitarian assistance has increased from a rough 100 million euro 10 years ago to a record 2.1 billion probably by the end of this year. So an astonishing development we surely appreciate from the humanitarian community and on behalf of the people served. Having said that, there has been a broad perception, and just a few days ago, an NGO representative confirmed to me, money is not the issue in Berlin, it's rather what we all make out of it. So there has been analysis, also in the run-up of our think tank and beyond, about the capacities and how to deal in the public and on the civil side in the humanitarian world, on the policy front, on humanitarian reform, on humanitarian principled action, and how to engage in the international agenda and to support that one, given that also German NGOs, of course, have a much stronger role to play and are much higher funded than in the past. To fill a bit this gap, that there is still a perceived gap between a financial engagement and policy capacities, we try to give a hand and to join forces a bit with especially civil actors who not always have the resources to build big policy divisions themselves and to engage on all international arenas. Having said that, our mission is not really to add further papers to the files, to add further to a rather academic debate, but really to bridge from the academic, theoretical one on the policy level to the practitioners and to make this really relevant for what aid practitioners are doing and what we expect from them. So what does that actually mean? In concrete terms, maybe the topic of our conference today is one of the best examples how we try to fill this and make this materialize. When defining our priority areas of work until 2021, quite frankly, I've been one of the skeptics saying, do you really want to add to the triple nexus to put more into this academic theoretical debate? But the more we dived into it, the more obvious it became to us that there are definitely a couple of reasons to do so. For one, it's probably the one debate with the greatest momentum internationally these days, while at the same time the greatest controversies involved in it. So it makes this a really interesting, challenging debate. And what we identified at the same time is two gaps in this debate, which we would like to address together with you and with colleagues of all these other thrilling think tanks out there. The two gaps we would see one, there has been a lot of debate about the triple nexus, but what does it actually mean in practice? Isn't there a major gap? Even if we look at the pilot countries, the EU pilot countries, what do we learn from them? Very little experience and even less so analysis from our view. Second, peculiarly, especially the new part of this triple nexus, from our view, is the most neglected one, which is actually the peace leg. There have been decades of debate, as many of you will know, about the humanitarian development nexus, about linking relief, rehabilitation, development. But now, do we need to deal with peace as well? Isn't that another leg in these times? And this has been the new approach. But when looking at the experience with Nexus programs, but also analyzers so far, it's still pretty much focused, from our view, on this humanitarian development angle, which we are all so much used to due to the past years and decades. So we identified these two gaps and thought, well, that's a really important entry point and something we would really like to look at in our work, but also in this conference. But are we right with that, or is that just a funny idea of some new guys in Berlin? For this, let me pause before I would like to introduce you a bit more to the topic in our conference, and let's see what your views are, what you think about this. And we reached out to you, and many of you in the run-up of this conference. We did a survey on a couple of questions on the triple nexus, and would like to share with you now the 5 top findings. And that's done by somebody who knows much better these numbers and knows a lot about the topic as well. Let me introduce you to Sonja. Sonja Hövelmann is my research fellow at the Center for Humanitarian Action, and she's been a major player in this whole project, and she knows numbers and stats by heart. So that's really an asset. And with this, over to you, Sonja.
Thank you for the kind introduction, Ralf. So indeed, we asked professionals from the development, humanitarian and peace sector what they think about the triple nexus. And 101 professionals indeed participated, mostly from agencies with a basis in Germany and their staff abroad. And while we are very glad for everyone that participated in our survey, the small sample number only allows for indicative findings, so please keep that in mind while reading the graphs. Indeed, the survey is much more encompassing, but I would like to present 5 key findings this morning. Further information can also be found in our publication, Triple Nexus in Practice, where more details are on the survey. So overall, respondents view the triple nexus rather as a top-down approach, but they also view that the debate is quite relevant to them. So if we look at the first graph, indeed a majority of 51% of the respondents view the triple nexus positively, either as a chance or a vision, while only 11% view it negatively as a threat or an overload. Also, 1/3 sees it as the next buzzword, hinting at the notion of a resurfacing debate, as Ralf just mentioned. As you can see in the next graph, we also asked respondents what they perceive as the key challenges to implementing the triple nexus, and indeed 70% view the unclarity of what it means in practice as a major challenge to the implementation of the triple nexus. Also, increasing coordination needs were named as by half of the respondents as a major challenge. So apparently there is quite a gap, and this is quite a crucial factor what the practice looked like. And I'm happy to mention the Triple Nexus in Practice panel, which will happen after the opening dialogue. As you can see in the next slide, we also asked respondents how they perceive the risk to humanitarian principles. And the answers there were quite divided. So in fact, half see it as likely or very likely that the triple nexus poses a risk to the humanitarian principles, while the other half views it as unlikely or very unlikely. But as you can see in the next graph, indeed, when those answers are divided by the professional background, so either more a humanitarian background or a development background, in fact, almost 2/3 of the humanitarians see it as likely, as opposed to only less than 1/3 of the development professionals. We also inquired about the peace pillar, and as you can see in the next slide, a majority of the respondents indeed wish their employer to expand peace efforts in their future programming. So almost half said, yes, we would wish our organization to expand their peace efforts, while only 31% said no, we should not engage in peace. And when we asked the respondents what it needs to engage in this peace pillar, most of them wished for a strategic decision on an overall approach, defined red lines, as well as an honest conversation about what peace means in the nexus. Yet while a majority indeed wishes their organization to engage with peace, few see their organization as well prepared. So as you can see in the graph now, 54% view the preparedness of their organization as negative, as opposed to 40% who see it positively. And the next graph shows that indeed only 48%, or indeed shows that 48% indicated that their organization made no changes to enable a triple nexus approach since the World Humanitarian Summit. To sum up the key findings, The majority of the respondents view the triple nexus positively, either as a chance or a vision. 70% view the unclarity of what it means in practice as a key challenge. Half of the respondents see that the triple nexus could potentially pose a risk to the humanitarian principles. A majority wishes for a future engagement in the peace action, yet few respondents see their organization well prepared to do so. Further details also on the methodology of the survey and other graphs can indeed be found in the publication that will also be shared in the chat. And with that, I would like to hand back to my colleague Ralf.
Thank you, Sonja. I think really interesting results thanks to your support. And let us quickly build maybe on some of the key major findings. For a start, a vast majority of humanitarians believes that the humanitarian principles might be at risk if you engage in the triple nexus. So why should humanitarians care at all to deal with this and to mingle with very political, often development objectives, with the peace negotiations and peace programs, which by nature are not necessarily impartial or neutral? As this will be surely part of our opening discussion in a few minutes here with the director of SIPRI, and with the spotlight session we have this afternoon with Marc Dubois, who has done a paper for us on this. Let me only share two trends, two graphs very quickly, why there might be an interesting trend and correlation between two trends, actually. So if we look at the rise of humanitarian needs, in the boom of what is needed to deal on a global scale with humanitarian needs, there has been this shocking boom since 2000 of the global overview annual humanitarian needs in the year 2000, starting with $2 billion, but reaching an astonishing $40 billion today. And you can see that COVID has been only the last jump to it, so it's really a long-term trend. If we mirror at the same time and look only at the development and the numbers of non-state armed conflicts in the very same time and add this curve to the very same graph, I think it gets pretty obvious that there are two parallel developments. Two parallel developments not necessarily mean they are correlated. So let's add maybe two figures to that. One is the duration of conflicts has increased in the same period to roughly, on average, 27 years. So every single conflict which is counted in this graph lasts on average 27 years and might make humanitarians deal with it, might make us respond due to a humanitarian crisis involved to it. And how much this is actually the case, we can see if we add another figure some of you might have heard before. 80% of humanitarian needs today are linked to conflict settings. So 4 out of 5 dollars or euros spent or donations from the global south are correlated to conflicts. And the final figure, is that only a temporary perception, only a temporary trend? If we take an outlook using the just published the Next Fragile States report of the World Bank and UNICEF, unfortunately the outlook is gloomy as well, as in less than 10 years, 2/3 of the extreme poor, of the ones which should be the people most bothering us, will live in fragile, conflict-driven states. So it is something we believe makes us to be sure on one point, and that's when we have to position to the triple nexus. Everybody has to deal with it. It is an issue you can't get around. So what does that mean for practitioners or for donors or for policymakers? What does it mean for organizations who have a mandate not only to save lives short term, but also to fight root causes of poverty, of hunger, of all these emergencies? If we look at that, what are the key topics to discuss if you really want to fight these root causes? If the triple nexus is a chance and a positive approach to most of you, but the large majority sees their own organizations not that well prepared. How do we have to deal with peace then actually in this nexus? This will be part of the opening panel, which will start right after the dialogue with SIPRI and hosted by my colleague. Moving us to another point in the program, which I would really like to highlight to you, as 70% of you named that the key obstacle to implement the triple nexus is that it's so unclear what it means actually in practice. And this will be part of the opening panel as well here over the course of this morning. And this can be confirmed, this perception can be confirmed from our side if we look at a few country examples, which I would like to highlight and then close. Take Pakistan. We've done research on Pakistan on a state-led nexus implemented in Pakistan, and we'll discuss that tomorrow afternoon with the country director of ACF in one of our spotlight sessions. So what does the triple nexus mean, and how should it be implemented, if at all, in a state-dominated nexus in a country like Pakistan, and there are many others out there, where you can't get around a state which might be, for example, and for a start, party of conflict. Take the example of Mali, a very prominent country debated in the triple nexus, a country with vast external policy interests, security interests, for example, of European powers. How do you deal with it if humanitarians fear from the very beginning that they might be instrumentalized for rather security versus peace goals, for migration issues which are or should be not really linked to impartial humanitarian action? And if we engage in peace in these contexts, what do we mean by peace? Is it peace as a long-term goal to have a peaceful Mali in future, or is it a security issue, a short-term one, which might even conflict with long-term goals, as some people see confirmed by the latest coup d'etat in Mali? Finally, if you take the third example of South Sudan, a totally different story. We heard and analyzed a country which local communities promoting a triple nexus or even implementing it already for a long time and asking for an integrated approach and with local capacities around to do so. But if it's a good idea to engage in peace, for example, in South Sudan, program-wise, what does it mean? Dealing with peace programs has a range we can notice from the macro level, from the elites and the state conflicts, all the way down to maybe social cohesion, which is promoted for host communities hosting large numbers of refugees. It's linked these days to youth employment programs, because the youth might not radicalize if you offer them other options, economic options. Or is by now education in every sense already a peace program? When I talked to a practitioner from a Western agency in South Sudan, he confirmed, well, there's a lot to talk more about donors and not so much about the affected populations to label things as peace, and there's a lot of box ticking ongoing. So how do we deal with that in future? Speaking of which, donors will be at the heart of our discussions this afternoon and especially tomorrow morning, as many see donor policies as one of the two key issues how to implement the triple nexus. And analyzers from us indicated also that there might be even a triple donor paradox, for example, in South Sudan, with donors promoting a triple nexus, but not getting out of the silos themselves and not making enabling actors really to implement it. But if that's true and representative for other countries, we will discuss tomorrow with high-level guests, with a commissioner from the German federal government, Bärbel Kofler, commissioner for human rights and humanitarian aid, and with the leadership of ECHO, Michael Köhler, the Deputy Director General of the humanitarian arm of the European Commission. Finally, if we claim that we want to put the triple nexus into practice, what do we have on offer? We would like to discuss tomorrow our analysis model toward the avocado, or some people call it by now already the chavocado. And sorry for the wordplay. But we would like to offer an analysis model in the shape of an avocado, indicating 3 spheres of analysis, and offer 3 options how organizations could deal with the triple nexus in practice in future. However, with this quick run through the program and overview of it, I'm really glad that for now I can leave all these complex and challenging questions to our guests. And I'm very pleased that our very first one is coming neither from our comfort zone in the humanitarian and development world, but from a peace institute and one of the leading peace institutes. And our guest will be hosted by my colleague, Andrea. Andrea Steinke is our research fellow on the Triple Nexus and coordinating this project. And she will be your host for the next 2 hours.
Thank you, Ralf. I would also like to extend a very warm welcome to everyone. I'm very excited about the 2 days to come. I think there is something in it for everyone who is interested in humanitarian development and peace debates, and I hope it will also we are going to try to focus a little bit more on the issues at hand. I'm looking forward to enlightening discussions and interactions, not only with the 22 experts who will join us for panel and spotlight sessions, but also we wish for a very fruitful engagement with you as the audience. So please don't hesitate to post comments and questions in the chat, and we will deal with it later. As Ralf mentioned, I'm Andrea Steinke. I'm a research fellow at the CHA, a social anthropologist by training, and I have focused extensively in my research on issues of humanitarian assistance and humanitarian governance in my fieldwork and my research. And this is one of the reasons I'm especially happy and honored to open this conference with a fellow researcher, and even more intrigued with one with that specific particular research profile. So let me introduce her to you. Dr. Marina Caparini is a senior researcher and director of the Governance and Society program of the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute, SIPRI. Her research has focused on security and justice governance, peace operations, post-conflict peace building, and the nexus between security and development. She is currently working on the role of gender-sensitive and inclusive health initiatives to strengthen social cohesion and peace and conflict-affected societies. With a background in war studies and comparative politics, she has conducted fieldwork in such places as Guinea, Haiti, Kenya, Liberia, Mali, and Sudan. She has provided analysis and policy support to a range of international and regional organizations, host and donor governments, and advocacy and human rights groups. Dear Marina, we are very, very glad to have you here. Hi. Let's just dive right into the topic. As seen from the perspective of someone with so much policy and fieldwork experience, where did the discussion around the humanitarian development and peace nexus originate from your view? I currently cannot hear you. Okay. Did you turn your microphone on?
Hello.
Yes. Now.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation to speak with this audience. I really value this opportunity. I think that the current emphasis on the triple nexus is a result of converging and reinforcing trends that have put the humanitarian system under enormous strain, as we've heard, but are also showing how interrelated these factors are, and that a siloed approach just doesn't cut it anymore. So although we know that armed conflict has declined generally since the end of the Cold War, from 2010, there was an increase in armed conflict, and it really spiked by 2016. There are qualitative changes in the nature of armed conflicts as well, in that they are increasingly protracted. They involve a proliferating number of armed groups. They're complex. They're increasingly internationalized, whether through direct involvement of other parties or through proxies. So we see conflict becoming increasingly complex. It has spillover effects in regions. We also see that peace agreements are prone to failure. 50% of peace agreements fail within 5 years, and often because of a failure to address underlying socioeconomic factors that are drivers of conflict. We also find that in fragile contexts, one crisis is often followed by another kind of disaster. And so you have a compounding effect. And what this means is, of course, as we know, displacement is at record levels, 79.5 million displaced in 2019, 80% of those located in countries affected by acute food insecurity and malnutrition. And so the result is that we have extremely high levels of humanitarian need. We have protracted and cyclical emergencies, fewer resources to deal with it, geopolitical tensions, which is constraining and undermining cooperation, international cooperation, shortfalls in global humanitarian funding, and even on the peace domain or peace dimension, we have peacekeeping budgets that have been reduced by 30% over the past 5 years and are likely to continue being reduced.
Thank you for this first overview, Marina. So as we have heard, it has been kind of 4 years since the World Humanitarian Summit, since the whole discussion started. In your view, where do we stand regarding the triple nexus and its potential actually to contribute to collective outcomes in the aid sector?
What I see is a building momentum, and I see some evidence of progress, but I also perceive that there are major challenges to actually implementing and realizing a triple nexus. We see more evidence of work at the nexus through joint analysis, joint planning, some operational coordination, especially within the UN system. We see the creation of new structures, the JSC. We see donors committing to the concept and the idea of the triple nexus. The OECD DAC recommendation in February 2019 was, I think, a big step. And we're seeing a lot of good analysis and thinking around the nexus that is being done, such as the States of Fragility report, which identified, for example, the role of diplomats and diplomacy in being able to navigate across the nexus. So we see a lot of movement and I think thinking, but there continue to be barriers and missed opportunities for joined up interventions. Yeah.
Could you sketch out some of those missed opportunities to us?
Yeah, so I'd like to focus on the peace building dimension. In my view, the peace and security communities have not fully engaged with the triple nexus discussion. To me, that discussion is being driven by the humanitarian and the development communities. There needs to be more deliberate effort to engage them, and particularly with regard to positive peace. So not just in terms of the absence of armed conflict, but in terms of trying to understand attitudes, institutions, structures, dynamics that create and sustain peace over the long term. And that would mean looking at factors like well-functioning government and governance, low levels of corruption, establishing effective oversight, accountability mechanisms, achieving more equitable access to security and justice for all parts of society, but also access to essential services like health and education, access to livelihoods, respect for human rights, and the rule of law, basically also building societal cohesion. And for me, a really concrete example, if you like, of a missed opportunity in the security and justice field, SDG 16 and Pathways for Peace report, which was a very major piece of research that really brought together the best of current thinking about conflict prevention and sustaining peace, puts a very strong emphasis on creating strong, inclusive, and responsive institutions for sustainable peace and development. But these are largely being interpreted as state institutions. And in the security and justice field, particularly in the UN community, I would say, there seems to be an aversion to working with customary and traditional justice actors, for example. And yet in many fragile contexts, we know that the vast majority of people are going to resort to customary and traditional justice actors. And so this sort of resistance to dealing with the non-state, I feel, is is a major missed opportunity for peacekeeping operations, for security and justice actors who are truly interested in finding sustainable peace.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. I'm very glad because you already touched upon and highlighted some of the issues we will discuss in the course of the following 2 days, like the role of state institutions and non-state actors, as well as the missing link with the peace community, the peace research community. So it kind of builds a good path towards our discussions. I would just like to mention right now that for the chat and the audience, please, again, I invite you to post quick questions and comments for a little bit later in the session. And for now, I would love you, Marina, to tell us a little bit more about your own research and what it suggests with regard to the peace leg of the Nexus, the triple Nexus.
Sure. So my background is very much in the security and justice field, security sector reform and governance. And it's interesting to note that security sector reform really was developed within the context of the development community. And it was seen as sort of at the nexus of security and development. And in its original conception, SSR sought to transform the state in terms of its delivery of the essential services of security and justice through the building, the strengthening of institutions that are effective, legitimate in the eyes of the population, inclusive, responsive to their needs, and accountable. Unfortunately, SSR has had a trajectory that, in my view and in the view of a lot of people who have worked in SSR from the beginning, feel that it's been quite unfortunate. There's been a sort of diversion of security sector reform towards security sector assistance. There's been a sort of predominance of train and equip, capacity building, technical, let's say, assistance provided, and ultimately a failure of SSR to deliver on its original promise of bringing greater access to security and justice to all people within a community. So I would say that one of the failures that's consistently been identified in my research and that of others is really the inadequacy of security sector reform as it has developed. And this to me is one of the big issues that I think needs to be engaged with if the triple nexus is to engage effectively with the peace and security community.
Okay, thank you very much. I think what you've just mentioned explains not 100%, but I think to a big percentage what is going on, for example, in the Sahel region at the moment. So we will speak about that later today. For now, I would want to invite my colleague Darina Pelowska to tell us what's going on in the chat. Darina, please. Join us on the stage.
Hello, Andrea.
Hi.
And congratulations for this great start of the conference. The chat has been not so lively as we hoped, but I just got one very interesting question a minute ago that I wanted to present here. And Rochelle Elian, I hope that I pronounced that correctly, just posted that we've been talking about resilience, peace, and a triple nexus for a long time. So it's not really a new concept. Mm-hmm. And she says that her experience makes her understand that a lot of times humanitarians and development actors, we are talking of us as humanitarians and development actors, and we don't even understand our own jargon. And now, what are some of the positive lessons that we we have and that we might lean on to move on forward. So that's her questions from the chat. I hope that I put that clearly, because I'm just reading it as it was posted on the chat.
Okay. So, Marina, as I have understood the question, it's about what is new about the Triple Nexus as with an add-on of the more traditional humanitarian development nexus, and what are the positive lessons we've learned so far. I would like to.
I guess because I'm coming from the research world, I think that there is a lot of innovative and important research that's being done, which isn't being reflected in policy so much, and could be very useful to inform the Triple Nexus at this point. I think that there's a need to be doing more research across systems, and systems for establishing government systems, for providing essential services, for responding to crisis and emergency, for developing conflict-sensitive approaches. I think there's a lot of knowledge in the humanitarian and development communities that the community dealing with peace and security hasn't accessed. I think there's also a need to understand more about different actors across the nexus and understand their institutional cultures, understand their professional roles, maybe their training, and why they tend to see things in particular ways, and paying attention to the lessons learned, because this may be an old discussion about increasing coordination, but things have moved on as well. Our scientific understanding, our frameworks, understanding what works within certain circumstances, what doesn't work, and caveats. And so, we need to tap into that knowledge that has accrued in the intervening decades since this concept was first launched. There's a lot more understanding about that. There's far to go, but I would say that at least from a research perspective, there's much to tap into now.
Yes, I fully agree, and thank you for pointing something out to me that wasn't so much on my radar before. It's not only the organizations and institutions and their silos that kind of are trapped into their silos. I think also the research institutions have a clear focus on either peace or humanitarian issues. So this is a good hint also towards ourselves to also think across those thematic strands a little bit more. We don't have much time left. Nevertheless, I would love for you to answer one small question more, and this has something to do with outlook. So where do we go from here? Where do we stand, and what's your final word of advice to the aid community, the humanitarian community as well?
Yeah, I guess my final plea is for one of simplicity and streamlining. Even acknowledging the huge complexity and the diverse bodies of knowledge that are necessary to navigate, to understand how to work through the nexus. There's a plethora of plans and mechanisms and guidance and 300-page documents that bring together a lot of the research that's been done. And this is overwhelming even for me as a researcher in this field. And I'm just wondering, how realistic is it for those who plan and implement policies and programs? I think we need to do a better job at communicating to our counterparts across the nexus and to donors and policymakers and affected publics. And we need to condense our findings and our approaches in a way that is far more accessible to our colleagues and to the diversity of actors across the spectrum.
Marina. I think to sum it up, it's kind of what I've heard from your side. It's a little bit more less paper and more action, or more clear advice as to what we are dealing with right now. Thank you so much for giving us this very concise introduction to our conference, and I hope you will stay on a little bit longer today and engage in the discussion as well. We will now take a short break of more or less 1 minute to then join here again for our first panel on the triple nexus in practice. See you soon.